Shalom and welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. As you know, these podcasts are designed to shed some light on the impact of longevity and the longevity revolution on ourselves, our families, our communities, and a lot of times just our souls itself. And we have a very, very interesting approach to that today. And we'd like to welcome very, very much to the show Rabbi Jade Sank Ross, the author of To You I Call. This is a it's a CCAR press book recently published in the last part of 2024. This is a very, very interesting take on the book of Psalms. So first of all, my colleague, Rabbi, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us from, you're in Long Island, right? Or New York City or somewhere up there, Giants fans, Mets fans.
Very close by. We're in Queens, Forest Hills.
Forest Hills. Okay. Anyway, To You I Call. This is a book that links the Psalms, the sacred Psalms, to, I guess the easiest way to say it is things that are going in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And Jade did this wonderful linkage. So I want to ask you, first of all, what was the motivation of all the things, that you could probably sit down and say, well, I have nothing else to do today, so I think I'll write a book. Why this? What was it about Psalms and your training and your life that motivated you to do this?
This really began as my rabbinic thesis at HUC JIR, where we first met in New York. And I worked with Rabbi Sonia Pills when she was a professor there. And she really inspired me to think about our texts in a different way. And I went to her heading into my 5th year of rabbinical school, towards the end of my 4th year, knowing that I was going to be spending a year, maybe a little more than a year, on some sort of capstone or thesis project. And I said to her, I don't want to just write some paper that's going to sit in the library, and I really want to do something that's useful. The one thing that I really like to do as a rabbi is to make our tradition approachable for people who don't feel like they know enough or don't know where to begin. And I really want people as a rabbi to understand the richness of Jewish tradition and particularly of our texts and to feel personally connected with it. So this all began there with that idea. And I went to Rabbi Pills and I said, what do you think? Like, what's a traditional text that I could do this with? Is it the Psalms? Is it another book of Tanakh? Is it Talmud? Is it where do we go from here? And she, knowing that and knowing my interest in music, she suggested Psalms and said, pick up the book and start reading Psalms. And so I spent 3 months just immersing in the book of Psalms, and I started to see them connecting to my life in various ways. So I started with the Psalms for each day of the week. Every day of the week, Sunday through Saturday, has a psalm assigned to it in Jewish tradition. So I started there with those 7. And from there, kind of moved out to other psalms that were traditional for other moments and times, be they holidays or things that were happening in my life for those 3 months. And then kind of just exploring from there and trying to read through the entire thing and keep notes. And so that's what I did, just a full immersion. And as I did that, I started seeing Psalms everywhere, connecting with everything. They were popping up. I was a rabbinical student at the time, so that probably helped a little bit too. But they were popping up in my learning. They were popping up in music. I was seeing them in quotations and hearing them in speeches. The wonderful thing that I found about the Psalms is that they're not just a part of Jewish tradition. They're part of the tradition of anyone who reads the Hebrew Bible. They're part of American tradition, and they appear all over the place. So that's really where this began for me, was looking at them in a new way and seeing them pop up all over the place in my life and thinking, this is what I'm looking for. This is something that really roots me in my tradition, and particularly in text.
Why do you think Psalms are so powerful? You're right. It's cross-denominational, religious traditions. It's sort of like it's an okay place for traditions to meet. Why? Why do you? I mean, you channel in the book some people who've written, some of our colleagues of blessed memory who've written. Our colleague Rabbi Elise Frischman explores some of this in her wonderful foreword. But what is it about you? What is it about the Psalms that touched you? You could have gone anywhere. And why do you think it's so universal?
I think for me, it's that their poetry and their song, and they express feelings that we still have today. And we find ourselves validated and we can look into, they're a mirror to us. I just think that they're so deeply felt, and our ancestors who composed them, our ancestors who studied them, the generations of scholars and rabbis and commentators who have translated and written on them for thousands of years before us, have, I think, found exactly this in them, have highlighted these connections in different ways, be they through translation or through commentary or through highlighting various pieces of them, through art, through music. There's just, from Psalms, there's so much drawn from it. I think that coupled with that is some really challenging content as well, which I address in the introduction of the book, that they're not all, the Psalms, like any book of poetry, are not all happy and wonderful. They don't all fulfill exactly what we're looking for immediately. Some of them are incredibly violent and express things that we would not express even today, or that we would not be looking for. And what I think nevertheless keeps me going back to them, and what I think makes them rich in general, is that all of this is very human. And no matter how our times change, and no matter how we might express our anger, our longing, our pain, our grief, our joy, whatever it may be, we can find those words, whether in a psalm in its entirety or in just a line or a phrase. It's expressed in there. It's just a matter of finding your way through the 150,
right,
to find what you're looking for. So that was really the task that I set out to achieve with this book.
So if we have colleagues watching or listening, or directors of education, et cetera, this is, when you look at this, when you get the book, you'll see this can be easily adapted to an adult education across age-wise, not necessarily for older adults or adults, but certainly teenagers. And you break things down into like several categories: anticipation, commemoration, despair, gratitude, pain, and relief. And then you take each one of these rubrics and craft certain psalms relating to life situations that speak to those particular rubrics. For example, and right off the bat, the leadoff batter, to use a baseball imagery, since spring training is only a month away. The very, very first offering in anticipating the first Psalm number 1, you do on making life-changing decisions. So, here you have it, Chase. I have to make a decision about my life. Here's a Psalm, and in each one of these is a little sort of like, if I could call it an introductory paragraph, I guess it's like a thought starter. So you write, in this moment of discernment, we look for wisdom to guide us. This Psalm asks that as we seek the divine as a guiding source, we may be able to align ourselves with righteousness to make decisions that lead us to inner peace. Every single one of us have had to make decisions, sometimes randomly because something just happened, or sometimes we know something and now we have to make a decision and we're torn in the middle ways. So what I'm saying is, here's a Psalm that can help you deal or guide you. You're not going to make the decision for you, but at least give you, sir, perhaps some inner strength. Talk to me about Psalm number 1.
So with every Psalm, I want to note exactly what you're talking about here, Rabbi Address. With every Psalm, I actually, as I was writing them, I thought of them as kavanot, intentions. Those first couple of sentences at the top of the page. So there were, as I was dividing up the book, there, for anyone who knows me well, they know that my love of spreadsheets, and this book started entirely as a spreadsheet with certain moments in our lives and certain Psalms. And as I went through, there were certain Psalms that connected with certain moments, be they traditional or as I read them, it was just obvious what moment I felt they went with. And then there were also moments in our lives where I felt like we needed a Psalm to go with it. So each page has a kavanah at the top to just give a little, as you said, an introduction, a little intention, a little lead-in to reading this Psalm at a moment of making a life-changing decision, for Psalm 1 in particular, the first in the book. And in addition to that, there's one Hebrew phrase highlighted, phrase or verse. It's kind of like a crown at the top of the page. In the Hebrew text itself is a little bit more decorative in the book, but it's also bolded in the English translation of the text. And the texts are Rabbi Richard Levy's translations from his, it's a 2-volume set, Songs Ascending. So that's where the translations come from. And it was really important to me that the book be slim in order to be useful, to be able to be transported. So there's only English translation in the book, except for this little bit of Hebrew. And that corresponds to one verse or phrase, as I said, that's also bolded. So that was also where I kind of drew the kavanah from. Not necessarily the entire Psalm. In some cases, yes. In many cases, I really focused on a particular verse. And so this one, for Psalm 1, in a moment of making a life-changing decision, I highlighted the beginning, the first half of verse 3. Like such a person is a tree planted by a stream of water. And so I felt like this really conveyed a sense of steadiness in a moment when I think where we're making a life-changing decision, it feels the stakes are very high, and it feels like there isn't time to slow down and to stop, and there isn't time to hold still. And yet this verse just so spoke to me about a tree being planted by a stream of water. It conveys a sense of stillness in that moment as everything's rushing by. And yet we know that the tree is affected by the rushing water. It's not going to be unaffected. It's going to be tilted. It could even be uprooted, perhaps. But it in that moment, I was thinking this is sort of the image of steadiness that I think that this psalm conveys, and that I think that this moment calls for.
No, and the image is because so many times we're so stressed, and there's a great psalm in here about stress. And that life comes at us sometimes unexpectedly, or we're dealt with things that we didn't expect or didn't want. And instead of, immediately reacting, that psalm basically says, time out. Just be for a little, be with yourself for a little while, and let things sort of like, just as the wind blows, just be. Just watch the waters go by and just be. What one of, if not the most popular is the wrong word, but most requested or discussed issues in Jewish sacred aging is this idea of caregiving. And lo and behold, Psalm 55 in the book, you talk about when caregiving, and you talk about the journey of caregiving can be lonely and isolating. We watch people we love in pain and change because of illness. May we find the endurance and strength to continue caring for our loved ones, ourselves, with compassion and grace. And you deal with Psalm 55 and highlight the phrase, would that I take wing like the dove, I would soar off and find a dwelling place. Talk to me a little bit about this psalm.
So this is a beautiful one. And I want to point out, in addition to every psalm on every page, there's at least one other psalm connected. Every psalm in the book is interconnected. So there's at least one other one listed in a footnote to go to. So for example, I was looking ahead from Psalm 1, the psalm for making a life-changing decision connects to Psalm 28. And Psalm 28, I have assigned to making it out of a precarious situation safely. And I'm just looking ahead now to the psalm for caregivers, Psalm 55. And I'll speak about this one, but I wanted to note that there's also these other connections depending on kind of where we are. I realize that as I'm writing this and as I'm working on this, I'm just me, just one person. And so clearly what I write and the verses I highlight and the psalms that I choose might not speak to everyone. So there's other options and other places to go with each and every psalm. There's an index in the back of the book if there's a particular psalm that someone's looking for. And my hope is that beyond the 72 psalms that are included in the book, I hope that, people will even go beyond that to the others that are not included. So Psalm 55, I highlighted this verse 7, would that I could take wing like a dove, I would soar off and find a dwelling place. I feel like for me, this captured both that sense of wanting to get away for a minute and have a moment to ourselves in order to care for ourselves and to be able to just sort of leave the stress of the situation we're in. But at the same time, as much as we might want to fly off and find some other place to go for a little while, we return to the nest that we flew from in the first place. And there's always a sense of migration with birds, a sense of coming and going, of wanting to fly off and being able to, and perhaps feeling like we long for the freedom to be able to do that. And at the same time, there's still this tie. There's still something that holds us to where we are and where we need to be. And I thought about that in a sense for caregivers, that it's as it really, thinking about a dove flying off seems so, it just seems to speak to that yearning, to that need to want to get away, just to not watch as we're seeing someone who we really deeply care for and love change and go through pain and so much, and to leave that behind, but yet at the same time to know that we can't completely leave it. And even if we could, our hearts probably couldn't. Wow.
No, you speak very much about the tensions that accompany a caregiver, holding on, letting go, I need respite care, but I have this responsibility. And again, by linking this real, I mean, there are hundreds, thousands and thousands of our people right now are caregivers, and they're struggling for exactly what you're talking about. And to be able to say, here's the psalm, just take 10 minutes, just take a couple of seconds and just let this be. I would imagine also that if I'm an educator or a colleague and I'm going to introduce this in my congregation, that it could also lead to a workshop on writing your own psalm. I'm thinking from my old Camp Harlem days, this would be a great camp.
Yeah.
Once you program at one of our, it never leaves you. So I'm just thinking of a group of people sitting at Harlem and in the pagodas writing their own psalms about stuff that's going through, especially teenagers, which is why I really want to stress to colleagues that this is not just for adults. Our teenagers are going through so many of these things, and you capture so many things. The carrier thing. There's a psalm entering a hospice, praying for a growing embryo. In one of the commemoration section, you have this very, very interesting short psalm, 131, on remembering a life-changing loss. And you said it, everybody deals with loss. We don't always get what we want, which I think was a rock and roll lyric from way before you were born. And one of the challenges in just how do we deal with when the answer is no, you're not going to get what you want? So this is a very, very walk me through this one. It's 131.
Mm-hmm.
Psalm 131, and the highlighted line is, I affirm that I have quietly composed myself.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me just of what you were talking about, the tree image too. It's just be for a while. Can you talk about that psalm?
Yes. So it is a very brief Psalm 131. And this remembering a life-changing loss is also linked. There are 3 other Psalms to go to from here, because I felt like this could come at any moment. Whether there is also a Psalm in the book for a first loss after many losses. And so remembering a life-changing loss, this could be really anything. And I tried to imagine not just for myself, but what possibilities could be there. And this verse in the middle, the second verse, there's only 3 in the entire Psalm. Yes, I mean, you said it. It's like that tree metaphor again, that there's so much that we keep inside that the Psalms give voice to. So even just a verse like this, I affirm that I have quietly composed myself. Like, there's such validation in that, in hearing that our ancestors have been saying that and have been feeling this sense of, I need to, on the surface, act or look or appear one way, but when I'm really internally feeling another. And our psalm acknowledges exactly that. So that was this was one of those ones that was, it was so clear what psalm and what verse and what to put this with, that this was clearly for a moment of life-changing loss, like clearly for a pivotal moment, and that this would be a psalm that's connected with several others that I think many people would come to in any moment of, in a variety of different moments of loss, perhaps, that may all feel life-changing at various times.
The idea of linking this again with life-changing moments, I think that's really, when I was looking at this and reviewing this, that's the thing that really struck me, that you took the time to navigate these psalms and relate it. And in each one of these 5 or 6 rubrics, you do everything from, the end of Shloshim, the end of mourning, accepting death, birthdays, pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies, wanted pregnancies, loss of pregnancies, on Psalm 90, the loss of one's ability, as bodies change, the climate stuff that you talk about, experiencing anti-Semitism, obviously right now, sobriety, respite care. And one of the other things that every colleague has dealt with, people going through some sort of major transition, like a separation or a divorce, and there are books on it, but you do a Psalm 103, Psalm 103, which talks about this whole concept. And before we start running out of time, and it is a long Psalm. It's a long Psalm, but you have the highlighted verse, which is really, for people who are listening to this and in the middle of dealing with a separation or divorce and all the emotions, is this great line: the Holy One will not strive forever, nor bear a grudge until eternity. It's another one of these themes that seems to percolate through your book, Jade, of, you just sometimes have to just take a moment and re-examine things, let it be, and see how it feels in a little bit. So talk to me a little bit about Psalm 103 when you say, when leaving, separating, or divorcing.
Yeah. So another piece here, which I spoke more recently as she was preparing to write the foreword with Rabbi Elise Frischman. I spoke with her about God in our lives, particularly as Reform Jews. And I mentioned at the beginning about helping people to feel connected with our tradition, particularly with our texts. And I think God is another piece of that. God is ever present throughout the Psalms. There's no avoiding God. And I think that that's another piece of what connects us to the Psalms throughout time, is that God is there in the Psalms, that we are calling to God, God is calling to us. And here in this particular Psalm in 103, the Holy One will not strive forever, nor bear a grudge until eternity. Even when we ourselves are experiencing these feelings towards other people, or being directed at us from other people, this really stood out to me as a moment where I need God to come in, and where it spoke to me to have a verse that so clearly calls to God as using the Holy One will not strive forever. Not even really a metaphor, but truly just the Holy One. And in this particular moment, I feel like we need to know that even if we feel like we might hold a grudge forever, or one might be held against us forever, because I think that's reality, God won't. And that's something that's really important for us to consider in our spiritual lives. And I think particularly in a moment of upheaval in every way in our lives, in our spiritual lives as well, it's important to remember that this isn't the end of it. It's not going to be upended forever. Our relationships with our spiritual life, with God, are changing and will continue to change. Our relationships with each other will perhaps continue to change. And I think that this really spoke to the spiritual first to me. And in a moment like this of leaving or separating or divorcing, this was a moment where I really wanted to tap into that.
So again, this, even with this, you see that this theme of transitions, of life transitions, and every single one of us goes through these things. And the gift that you're giving the community is like, here's a sacred text that speaks to exactly what you're going through. The book again is To You I Call. It's a CCAR Press recently published. You can get it through the CCAR, probably a good bookstore, or the Great God Amazon. And before we have to end, the easy question. You immersed your life in this project, and obviously with great passion. What'd you learn? What was the gift that this project gave you?
A couple of things. So one is that I thought this was just a project for me because I wanted to do something practical that would connect me and the congregants that I serve with our Jewish tradition and our Jewish texts at every moment in our lives, whether through study or prayer or personal prayer, acute moments, and regular mundane ones. And I have a terrible memory, so I needed to write it down in a spreadsheet. And little did I know, it became a book. And so for me, a piece of it is very much the learning that sharing what we're doing, our work, our thoughts, is important. And I couldn't have and wouldn't have done this unless I approached Rabbi Pills 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago, and said, here's what I'm thinking about, and what can I do? So that's one piece of learning is just sharing and making sure to ask those questions and share of ourselves and seek out people who can help and who can be partners in that. And the other thing is really that it takes such a village to write a book, and that I'm really grateful for the one that I have, for all of the teachers and people who were there from the beginning at HUC, all of my professors, all of my classmates, all of the musicians, all of the people who gave of their time and expertise and knowledge to teach me formally and informally, to share what they were working on, to share their music, to become my chavruta, to give money even to the CCAR towards this book and to other books like it, to the artists and every component of it. The cover artwork of the book is a piece by Rachel Braun that I found hanging at HUC. So this book really, for me, is a true testament to the village that put it together and to the people who have made me the rabbi that I am. I saw it hanging at HUC one day and asked about it. And now it's the cover of the book, and it's the cover of the CCAR catalog right now, which is pretty cool. And Rabbi Elise Frischman was my rabbi growing up. And, it doesn't get more full circle than that, than bringing it all together. So truly, I've learned an incredible amount, and learned even more so the strength of people and of community.
So this community and you and the gift that you are giving everyone for this book. So the best way to end this is the quote, the highlighted verse from the last Psalm. I think it's famous Psalm 19, where you highlight, "May there be favor for the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart before you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer." Jade, thank you very much for this gift. You just stay safe, stay healthy. Say hello to your family for me.
I will.
I think you'll find this experience changing even how you look at your own career, and maybe even readjusting some priorities by just going back into the sacred text that you study. So hatzlacha, todah rabbah. Stay healthy. It's the most important thing. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
To all of you, thank you again for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, if you'd like to touch base with us, just drop me an email, rabbi address at jewishsacredaging.com. If you'd like to support our work, go to the website. There's a conveniently located donate button. Just click on that, follow the prompts. It's really, really easy, and we are very, very grateful for it. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and a shout out to our producer, Steve Lubetkin. Again, until we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, thank you very, very much for your time. Stay safe, everyone, and most of all, be kind to one another. Shalom.